So the calendar flips to the holiday season, and, the world outside just tells us it's time for this mandatory peak level joy.
Right.
But if you are supporting an aging parent or maybe a loved one who is navigating a pretty significant loss, the reality is, well, it's far more complicated.
Hmm.
The sheer intensity of traditions and memories during this time can be just utterly overwhelming.
And this is exactly where the behavioral science perspective is so crucial.
Mhm.
That overwhelming feeling,
Yeah.
it rarely looks like the weeping we see in movies.
Yeah.
Instead, it shows up as these confusing shifts in behavior withdrawal, maybe refusal or just sudden changes in routine. And they're often misread by family members as, I don't know, rudeness or a lack of holiday spirit.
Exactly. I keep thinking about that story of Mrs. R and the almond cookies.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, every December, those cookies were the tradition she shared with her husband. After he passed, her daughter tried to restart it, putting the flour in the mixing bowl right on the counter.
Mhm.
And Mrs. R didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She looked at the setup, whispered, "Not this year," and walked away.
And for the daughter, that must have felt like a punch in the gut. I mean, a direct rejection of her efforts to connect.
Absolutely. But when we unpack that moment, we realize the refusal wasn't personal at all. It was a rapid, self-imposed emotional safety strategy.
Right.
The almond cookies weren't just food, they were this complex cue, carrying too much history, too much emotional weight, and Mrs. R system simply shut down that pathway to self-protect.
And that's really our mission today. We want to help you understand holiday grief, not as just sadness, but as predictable, protective shifts in behavior. Grief is a shift in patterns and triggers and in these avoidance behaviors.
Yeah.
And once you understand the underlying motivation, that drive to minimize pain, the behavior suddenly makes sense and you gain the tools to offer, real support.
Okay, so let's dive into how these signals actually show up. We need to look beyond just the general idea of feeling sad and start decoding the specific ways these protective behaviors signal an emotional overload.
The patterns are surprisingly consistent, really, because the triggers, the carols, the decorations, specific recipes, they're so powerful and they're so standardized across the season.
So let's start with the one we just mentioned, avoiding once loved traditions. Why does the simple act of avoiding something, like baking cookies, feel so powerful to the person who's grieving?
Well, it's a classic example of what behavioral scientists call escape-maintained behavior.
Okay.
They are not avoiding you. What they're avoiding is the instantaneous, intense emotional surge that they know will come with the activity.
Ah.
The brain does this really quick calculation of the emotional cost of that memory trigger, and if the cost is just too high, it initiates an immediate escape response to minimize the pain it knows is coming.
So they avoid the trigger to avoid the feeling.
Exactly, the feeling of that sudden, crushing loss.
But wait, so how do you manage the natural family frustration when they think it's rudeness? Especially with something like the sudden onset of fatigue during a party. They were engaged 5 minutes ago, and now they're saying they have to go lie down.
That is extremely confusing for caregivers.
Yeah.
And what's happening there is a massive cognitive depletion. Grief quietly burns a tremendous amount of energy because emotional regulation, it demands so much mental bandwidth.
You can think of it as a kind of cognitive masking.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
If they are trying to maintain a facade of engagement or, relative calm in this high stimulus environment, they're constantly filtering out all the memory triggers.
Right.
And that filtering mechanism requires immense effort. It rapidly depletes the emotional resources they need for just basic social interaction, and that leads to physical exhaustion. It's a silent, rapid tax on their entire system.
That reframing is so essential. It's not just physical tiredness, it's a mental system overload. We also see sharp changes in appetite or social engagement a lot. Why does the holiday meal become such a minefield?
Because holiday meals and these high stimulation gatherings are just packed with those sensory triggers. The smell of a specific dish, a song on the radio, even the seating arrangement, it instantly pulls up these bittersweet, involuntary associations.
The environment is just constantly reminding them of what's missing.
Constantly. So the change in appetite, or the withdrawal, is a behavior aimed at minimizing exposure to that intense, overwhelming input.
And then there's the one that I think causes the most conflict, irritability or short answers.
Hmm.
This is the classic symptom people mistake for, just being difficult.
It is so rarely rudeness. It's usually a symptom of severe emotional saturation. The environment is just packed with too many demands, social, sensory, emotional, and they just lack the internal energy to filter it or process it smoothly.
So the short answers are just easier.
They're the quickest, most efficient way to communicate without having to commit to a longer, more taxing emotional output.
What's so fascinating here is that these signals, leaving the room, disinterest in decorating, those quick answers, they are not a lack of holiday spirit at all.
No, they are clear protective behaviors designed to help an aging adult manage what feels like an unmanageable season.
So once we recognize the signal, how do we respond without adding more pressure? I mean, the instinct is often to try and pull them back in, right?
Right.
But this next section, it needs to focus on strategies that genuinely reduce the emotional load and foster safety.
And the primary goal for you, the caregiver, is just reducing friction and increasing predictability.
Okay, let's start with the INZAR example again. The first strategy is to shrink traditions instead of erasing them. We tend to think in such all-or-nothing terms.
We do. And if the multi-day full cookie baking tradition feels like climbing a mountain just covered in memories, we need to offer a gentle slope.
So what does that look like?
Maybe you suggest just preparing one small batch of dough, or perhaps only lighting the holiday candle that was always part of the tradition instead of the whole ritual.
Small versions.
Exactly. They respect the history while significantly reducing the emotional commitment, and that makes the activity feel manageable.
And that ties right into the second strategy, let them lead the pace. Caregivers so often ask for a commitment like, will you come to dinner for 3 hours?
And 3 hours feels like an eternity when you can't even predict your emotional state in the next 20 minutes.
Right.
So instead of asking for a time commitment, ask them to join for a moment.
For a moment. I like that.
Moments are non-committal, they're safe, they allow the individual to sort of test the emotional waters, and if it becomes too much, they can retreat without feeling like they've failed or, ruined the event.
We need to give them anchors when their internal world is so chaotic.
Absolutely. And one really powerful strategy is to create new rituals with gentle meaning. New rituals are key because they don't have that overwhelming established history of the old ones.
Like what, for example?
It could be a quiet 5-minute walk together before an event starts, or dedicating a short new toast to new beginnings, rather than focusing so heavily on the past. New rituals help the brain re-anchor the season in the present moment.
Since grief is so unpredictable, the external environment shouldn't be.
That is exactly right. We have to offer predictability during emotional days. Maintain steady routines. If breakfast is usually at 8, keep it at 8 even on Christmas morning.
Okay.
Ensure rest times are respected. Keep the order of holiday tasks consistent. That environmental predictability offers this necessary, steady psychological anchor when their internal state is just so chaotic and demanding.
And finally, the validation piece. You can't force them into an emotional conversation, but you can build massive trust by just relieving the pressure.
Validate. Without forcing conversation. You can use simple, direct, pressure-reducing phrases. Something like, we are so thrilled you're here, but you don't have to do anything you're not ready for.
Or even, I know this is hard, I'm here if you want company, but there's zero obligation.
Yes. That ensures they know their emotional limits are respected, which reduces the need for them to deploy those dramatic escape-maintained behaviors we talked about.
So now we can move into the deep dive Q&A on those specific, often frustrating, counterintuitive behaviors that caregivers report seeing every holiday.
Right.
Let's start with family storytelling. Why does my loved one retreat the moment family storytelling begins? I mean, caregivers see that as avoiding the family connection.
That perception is so natural, but it's inaccurate. Retreating is purely a protective behavior because they are not ready to hold those specific memories in front of others.
It's the public part of it.
Yes. Memories shared publicly carry a much higher cost. There's the fear of breaking down, the fear of losing control, the fear of burdening others with their pain. By retreating, they are maintaining emotional control. It's avoidance of the intense emotional exposure, not avoidance of the people telling the story.
Okay, here's one I found really surprising in the research. Why do mornings often feel harder during the holidays than the busy afternoons? We always think of the big gatherings as the stressful peak.
Mornings demand what we call activation energy, getting up, engaging with the day, moving into a routine. During the holidays, grief adds this profound emotional weight right at the start. The brain knows that the entire day ahead is going to be emotionally expensive.
So it's anticipating the drain.
Exactly. The morning becomes difficult because the brain anticipates the total emotional expenditure, and it struggles to initiate the movement necessary just to start the day. It's not about stress, really. It's about a lack of resources to meet the demand. The system tries to slow the start, to conserve energy, to self-protect.
This raises such an important question that speaks right to caregiver frustration. Why do they suddenly seem overwhelmed by simple questions like, are you coming to dinner? Or what kind of pie should we make?
Because questions, even minor simple ones, force decision-making. And during periods of intense grief or emotional saturation, decision-making feels incredibly heavy. A simple yes or no can feel like committing to an emotional state or a commitment they just might not be able to sustain.
Their cognitive capacity is just maxed out.
Completely maxed out,
Yeah.
just managing the underlying grief.
So, how do we get around that decision fatigue?
You remove the pressure of the open-ended question. Instead of asking, you state the situation and offer non-committal options. For example, we're eating at 4. If you want to join for a little while, you can just come down then.
That allows them to opt in passively.
Exactly.
Okay.
Without the pressure of a big, immediate commitment.
I found this next point absolutely fascinating, and it ties back to that behavioral control idea. Why do they suddenly favor small, repetitive tasks like folding napkins, clearing dishes, organizing decorations? But they avoid the big traditional ones like cooking the main course.
This is such a beautiful piece of cognitive insight. Small, repetitive tasks are the very definition of predictable, contained, and emotionally neutral. They don't carry the emotional weight of preparing a traditional meal, which is often just riddled with memory triggers. Repetitive organizing or cleaning is actually a recognized form of self-soothing behavior.
So it creates a sense of control.
It creates a needed sense of control in a world that feels internally and externally chaotic. It's active self-regulation, a low-stakes way to feel productive and centered without the emotional fallout.
And we should remember that these intense reactions aren't necessarily signs of regression, even if the loss happened years ago.
That is a crucial insight, especially for aging adults. Research confirms that anniversary reactions, and that includes holiday flare-ups, are normal and are often intensified years later.
So it's expected.
It's expected. Older adults can experience heightened responses to these familiar sensory cues because the memories are just so deeply ingrained. These are patterned, understandable behaviors tied to meaning and memory, not regression or a failure to cope.
And finally, what about that heartbreaking plea we sometimes hear, I don't want to ruin the holiday?
That statement is avoidance driven entirely by social pressure and fear. They fear their visible grief will be interpreted as a burden by the rest of the family.
So what's the antidote?
Profound, genuine reassurance. You are not ruining anything. You showing up, however feels right for you, is enough. We just want you here. That reassurance removes the pressure to perform happiness.
This whole deep dive, it just gives us permission to completely reframe how we view holiday grief. It's not the opposite of joy, it's the inevitable shadow that forms when profound love has been a part of many, many seasons.
And the goal is not forced participation or immediate cheer. It's about creating small, safe ways for a loved one to move through the holiday without feeling like they're going to drown in emotion.
Healing is quiet.
It's quiet, it's respectful of pacing, and it happens one gentle moment at a time.
And going back to Miss Sarah and the cookies, she wasn't rejecting her daughter or the holiday. She was just protecting her emotional capacity from an avalanche she wasn't ready to face.
Right.
And understanding that behavioral distinction, that's what gives the caregiver the tools to truly succeed in offering unconditional support this season.
Exactly. Grief and joy, they can coexist.
Yeah.
But only if the pace is not relentless and we respect that need for emotional safety.
So as you navigate this season with your loved ones, we want to leave you with one final concrete thought. If repetitive organizing or quiet withdrawal is a recognized form of self-regulation and emotional control, how might you intentionally create a predictable, neutral, small task environment in your own life? Even if you're not actively grieving, just to help manage generalized holiday stress. Think about your own self-soothing behaviors. Is folding laundry or organizing your desk your version of Mrs. R's cookie cleanup? Find that low-stakes, high-control task and build it into your holiday schedule.